The fact that we don't have stealth fighters is very stark and apparent because of what's happening in the neighborhood.
But some are more stealthy than others.
They're more stealthy than others. We'll come to that.
Yeah. There's a big debate in the AvGeek community that, why don't we still call them fifth generation? Others say, no, it's a sixth generation platform. It doesn't matter.
No, I'm really pushing for this let's not import stealth fighters idea because I think there still is some space for that. The fact that the AMCA isn't here.
No.
The AMCA is a long way off.
It's virtual reality.
NDTV CTRL ALT DEFENCE, powered by IFCO Tokyo General Insurance. Hello and welcome to this special episode 8 of CTRL ALT DEFENCE with Vishnu and me. Operation Sindoor has been over for a while, but as you can see, we're still talking about aircraft.
I think we'll wait for the next war and still talk about planes.
We'll still be talking about planes. Right. And today we're going to be focusing on something that so many of you have asked us to do an episode on, and that is stealth fighters.
And I think this is just going to be one of many episodes on this topic going forward.
How can we capture this entire incredible canvas in one episode? You're right, Vishnu. I mean,
in fact, if the first AMCA comes into service in 2032 onwards,
we'll still
best
be
case
talking about
scenario,
it.
Then we can have this, we'll be talking about this in 2032 as well.
No, absolutely. And we wish the AMCA the best. In fact, the Indian government, and we'll get into what we're talking about in a moment. But I'd like to start by saying that the headline peg, as we call it here in the media, which is to say a reason for why we're doing this episode, of course, is that fighter aircraft are very much in the conversation. The fact that we don't have stealth fighters is very stark and apparent because of what's happening in the neighborhood. The Chinese will soon be supplying an aircraft called the J-35, which is a Chinese stealth fighter, to Pakistan. The Chinese already have their own stealth fighter called the J-20, and this is a new one.
They've got more than 200 of them.
A second variety that they're going to be supplying to Pakistan, which basically means that Pakistan, which we've just almost gone to war with, will definitely have stealth fighters before India actually does. So there are implications for this. Fifth generation fighters, stealth fighters, all of these are on the table right now. But I'd like to start this off by asking you, Vishnu, what you think about the whole question of India not having stealth fighters right now.
It's a huge
Everyone's
problem.
trying to sell them to us as well.
It's a huge problem, Shiv. Let's face it, in as much as we love the Rafale aircraft and the Indian Air Force is completely vouching for it, perhaps they'd like more than 100 more. The Indian Navy has just gotten into an order for 26 Rafale M aircraft. There is a generation gap between the Rafale and the stealth. There is a good reason why a stealth platform is called a fifth generation aircraft and a Rafale is a fourth or 4.5 generation aircraft, and that is low observability. So in as much as the Rafale has brilliant sensors, both in terms of its radar, its defensive suite, its electronic warfare suite, its towed array decoy system, it is not typically a low observability platform in quite the same manner in which a stealth aircraft is. Its design form is different. And therefore, if Pakistan does have low observable aircraft, which would be the J-35, in fact, the first ones might even start entering service or coming into the PAF ahead of entering service at some time this year, that India is in trouble.
So
Why?
this year? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first could actually start coming in this year. They're really pushing for it. And they've gotten apparently into some agreement with the Chinese to ensure that the funding is done on very loose and terms favorable to Pakistan, as has been in the case in the past. If Pakistan starts acquiring low platforms which are low observable, in other words, stealth platforms, then that's an additional headache for the Indian Air Force, because tracking stealth aircraft requires a certain specialization. It's much more difficult. The time that you have to actually engage a potential stealth target is reduced greatly, and therefore, it's a problem.
Okay, so it's a problem, and before we delve a little deeper into stealth aircraft, obviously defense enthusiasts and those, especially those who watch Vishnu and me, know what a stealth fighter is, but just for those who don't, and we always talk to everyone here on this podcast, Vishnu, when we talk about stealth aircraft, we're talking about, Vishnu used the phrase low observable, which basically is a sort of composite phrase which means difficult to detect by radar and other sensors which are otherwise primed to look for aircraft, detect them, track them, and ultimately target them. So a stealth aircraft by its very nature is something you can, when you see stealth aircraft lined up They all have a sort of similar kind of shape. They're shaped
But
in a
some are
certain
more
way.
stealthy than others.
They're more stealthy than others. We'll come to that.
Yeah.
But you can largely tell what an aircraft is by its shape. And stealth aircraft tend to have a certain kind of plan form, a certain kind of geometry, which is designed to
Though it must be
not
said,
be
Shiv,
friendly to radar.
That's right. There's something called all aspect stealth,
Yeah.
and then there is something called low observable.
Okay, you're
right?
you're getting ahead of yourself
Yeah.
in terms of the complexity. Let's go take this one
Yeah.
step because even I don't know all this
Okay,
stuff.
okay.
So and I want to learn from you. So the Americans have two fifth generation stealth fighters operational. The F-22 is widely considered to be the first
Yeah.
fifth generation
Yeah.
stealth fighter to ever come into
They've
being.
got bombers which are stealth
They've got
also,
bombers
the
as
big
well.
V2s.
Yeah.
The
I'm
older
not even talking about the
F-117s.
F-117A. I'm just
Yeah.
going to begin this entire
Sure.
conversation with the F-22. The F-35 is there in large numbers as well. You talked about the two Chinese ones, one which they
Yeah.
have more than 200 of, which is the J-20. The J-35 is now going to be supplied to Pakistan.
Yeah.
There is the Sukhoi Su-57, which is a program that
That
India
one, yeah.
once upon a time was part of, but walked
Put
out of
money on.
under, sunk a lot of money into, correct, and ultimately walked out for reasons we'll
Yeah.
get into briefly. And then you've got the AMCA. There are a few other programs which I won't get into because they're minor programs, maybe. But in terms of purpose-built stealth fighters, I think this is largely the list. I want to come now to the AMCA. I want to get into that because it is from the AMCA that this entire situation is what it is and why we're talking about it. The fact that the AMCA isn't here.
No.
The AMCA is a long way off.
It's virtual reality.
And 2 days, Vishnu, 2 days after Operation Sindoor is when the government cleared what is called the execution model for the AMCA, which basically meant that the private sector and the public sector could compete to
Correct.
build and develop the AMCA. But forget about who's going to build and develop it. Where are we with the AMCA
Yeah.
and how far away is it?
The first prototype rollout was planned for late next year. I'd be very surprised if that takes place. The first flight was supposed to take place in the late 2028. I'll be very surprised if that takes place. There is funding for at least 5 prototypes. I think there is more money being given for more prototypes. Certification scheduled for 2032, right? And induction starts from 2034. That's the best case situation as of now.
Yeah.
Now, this means that Pakistan, once they start acquiring the J-35 at some stage this year, assuming that they get even 10 every year, it'll be actually at a faster rate, they would be operating stealth aircraft for 10 years, a full decade before India starts acquiring our first one. And with this being our first platform, the AMCA has to really deliver.
Yeah.
It has to be current. And remember, the Chinese have gone beyond the 5th generation. This is not going to be something we spend billions on to make it a Pakistan-centric platform. It needs to be China-specific as well and Pakistan-specific. And therefore, what the Air Chief said the other day when he was, I think, addressing industry was very important. The AMCA has to be of the current generation when it comes online.
Which is
cannot
9
be
years
stuck-
from now.
Starting induction in about 10 years from now. Starting. Best case scenario, right? It's 2025, 2035 is what the best case scenario is. Now, therefore, let's not get stuck on the word 5th generation.
Yeah.
Why? Because the Chinese have already, with their J-36 and J-50, 2 brand new platforms gone beyond 5th generation. There's a big debate in the AvGeek community that, why don't we still call them 5th generation? Others say, no, it's a 6th generation platform. It doesn't matter. The reason this debate is happening, right, on what generation they are, is because they are fundamentally different platforms.
Yeah.
With
And they're in the
objectives
air,
and
they're flying,
goals,
yeah.
right, from what we've seen from any other aircraft in aviation history. These are phenomenal designs which the Chinese have got out at this stage.
No, you're absolutely right. One has to acknowledge that
Yeah.
in terms of how aggressive the Chinese have been in terms of speed, getting things off the off the drawing board and into the air. These two aircraft are
it's
literally in
alarming
the air.
for India.
We'll do a completely separate episode on what the world thinks about these aircraft and quality, and there are
Yeah.
many issues to talk about when it comes to the Chinese. But the fact is, they've got these two aircraft, these so-called 6th generation fighters, in flight test and at least as technology demonstrators. Vishnu, 9 years till the AMCA comes online, the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft, which is India's own stealth fighter project. 9 years is an eternity in fighter technology, especially given what we've been seeing in the last few years, whether it comes to drone tech, drone warfare, manned, unmanned teaming, which we've spoken about in a previous episode. The sheer scale of the network and how it's becoming very much part of the future battlefield. I'm wondering whether 9 years from now, what we perceive to be a fifth generation aircraft is going to look like vintage stuff.
And what's more, we want to crack a century on debut with
Yeah.
our first stealth fighter. What are the chances of that happening? The number of technologies which you need to master. It's not just low observability, but reliability of the engine, integration of the GF414 engine onto that platform, if indeed that's the engine
If that
that's
is the
finally
engine, yeah.
selected.
Yeah.
The radar itself will be new build. We made a lot of progress as far as that is concerned. But weapons integration with the latest generation Astra missiles, presumably, all of that has to work. A stealth platform isn't just low observable, it's also got distributed arrays. In other words, it's got radars and other sensors, electro-optical sensors located across the platform.
Yeah.
So that the pilot over there uses the aircraft not just as a fighter, but as a sensor.
Yeah.
It is a sensor within a group of sensors which acquire information, pass it on through data links, and use it to exploit airspace, hit targets in the air or on the ground or out at sea. All of those sensors, radars, technology, low observability, the fly-by-wire control system, the new generations of weapons that you've got online, they all have to work all together.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, after 10 years, if it doesn't work all together, you're tinkering with it and you're fixing it, and you get into a situation where it's taken 15, 20 years for this to actually be the way you want it, then you're already far behind the curve. Look at how far behind the curve we are with the Tejas. I love the aircraft. The engineering is excellent. The made in India AESA radar is actually quite good. The fly-by-wire quadruple redundant is superb, right? The platform is ancient. The weapons carriage is ancient. The range is insufficient. It was built as a MiG-21 replacement. The Pakistanis have now got the J-10, which is not even a fifth generation aircraft, and are acquiring the J-35. So we've not even started. We've not rolled out the prototype of the Tejas Mark II.
Yeah.
So therefore, if you're talking about the AMCA,
Even the Mark 1A hasn't been delivered
that's
yet.
right. That's right. So if we are talking about the J-35, right, of the Pakistanis, which is coming around now, then they've got a big lead. And if you're talking about the AMCA, we don't want the AMCA to be 10 years from now what the Tejas is technology-wise with regard to where we stand vis-a-vis the Chinese and the Pakistanis.
Yeah, I'm just-
not there.
I'm just wondering, like what the air chief had said, and the aircraft needs to be contemporary when it finally arrives, which means that there has to be a kind of spiraling evolution, a constant concurrent evolution of this aircraft until it's ready to actually get into service. Where are things as far as the AMCA's technology is concerned?
Yeah.
This is a question that is often raised because we don't know very much about it. There are models that are displayed at the Aero India shows. There are a handful of interviews here and there talking about the broad aspects of the aircraft. But is India building a credible stealth fighter? I won't go into generations because that's going to become redundant a few years from now. Are we building a credible stealth fighter on our own?
Yeah, we are, but we better get it right,
Yeah.
and we better move on it fast. We've already built, and we've got a made-at-home AESA radar, which is actually very functional. It's going to replace the ELTA 2052, which is
Yeah.
an AESA radar on use on the LCA Tejas.
This is the
Mark 1.
Uttam radar.
It's the Uttam radar, except in the AMCA, I would presume there would be more TR modules. A TR module is a transmit-receive
Yeah,
module.
yeah.
That's at the heart of the technology itself. The larger the number of TR modules, by and large, depending on the power available to the AESA set, the ability to have very clear tracks of targets on the air and on the ground out at sea improves. So assuming that the Uttam is working quite well, and it is from what we know, it would have an evolved version of the Uttam radar.
Yeah.
You need to have a DIRCM, a directed infrared countermeasure system. That's something that needs to work, and it has to be there in the onset. The Rafale comes with a towed array, a towed decoy system. That's an Israeli unit. Whether we actually want one like that or not, we need to wait and see. Most importantly, it must have the distributed aperture, distributed sensors across, whether there are electro-optical sensors or radars in arrays across the aircraft,
Yeah.
so that the pilot has a 360-degree view of his or her airspace around them. The helmet-mounted sight, which is absolutely critical, and we've worked with Israeli helmet-mounted sights because they worked for us. In fact, just a quick question to you. I don't know if you know this. The F-35, fifth-generation aircraft, how much does the helmet cost?
Wow, I have no idea.
Would you believe me if I said when the first F-35s came along, each helmet, custom sort of fitted to a pilot, cost $400,000
Wow.
each. That's come down because they've got economy
Because
of scale.
they've
They've
had
built
to order
several
a lot
hundred.
of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they've ordered. So
Wow.
so you're looking at monumental costs. And as we've discussed in the past, you don't necessarily want to, build every piece of technology. You buy something, it'll cost a pretty penny,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So look, we've got the technology at home. The Astra missile has got a great deal of promise. We need something which outranges the Meteor, which is what the Rafale is equipped with. The problem is the longer the range of the missile, by and large, it needs to be a bigger missile. Now, the stealth platform has to have missiles stored internally.
Internal base. Yeah.
Right? Otherwise, it's no longer stealthy. Right? And that's the problem which the F-35 has. If there's one criticism of the F-35 is that if you want it to be truly stealthy, then the payload that it carries is not really what you would want it to be. So you're ending up slinging stuff under the wings of the F-35, in which case it's pointless in a sense.
Yeah.
So whereas if you look at the new Chinese, stealth aircraft, the J-50 or the J-36, these are the new ones. The J-36 has 3 engines.
Yeah.
It seems that the internal carriage of weaponry would be substantially larger, and they've accounted for the fact that it has to be all aspects stealth from the very onset, with enough weapons in internal bays and internal housing to ensure that you're not slinging stuff off the wings. That defeats the purpose.
Right.
So AMCA would need to be able to do that. And
It has
that
to get a lot
Astra
of things
missile is
right.
absolutely critical for us,
Okay.
right? We wanted to hit targets 300 kilometers plus away. That means it has to be a big missile.
Two of the big countries that make these stealth fighters, obviously I'm talking about the US and Russia, both would like India to think that it cannot wait for the AMCA. That it needs to acquire stealth fighters now because the air power imbalance is pronounced once the J-35s enter Pakistani service. And therefore you've got Trump earlier this year explicitly opening the door to a potential F-35 sale. And the Russians have been much less subtle about it. They've been pushing the Su-57 for a long time, and now it's become very, very pronounced. In fact, there was a media report suggesting that even the MOD has put out some information suggesting this. Now, we don't know if this is true or not, but I'm going to ask you this straight, Vishnu. Does India need a stopgap stealth fighter? Is that something that it cannot avoid? Because I'd hate for that to happen, to be honest.
Sad question. I mean, it's such a sad reality, not a sad question. I think the answer is probably yes. And how much
we
more
do need
money?
one of these.
Look, we need to have something which
would hate
works
for
for
that.
us. If the AMCA doesn't come along technology-wise or capability-wise, then we cannot be found wanting in 2035. Therefore, if you've got a platform which is relatively proven, it works for us, then you've got a certain backup or redundancy with the AMCA once it comes along. We can't wait for 10 years.
Yeah.
There has to be a platform. Now, I'm not sure whether the Russian Su-57, which is easily available to us, relatively easily available, is the solution. Couple of points. Firstly, Russia is in a war with Ukraine. They need to get their production capability sorted out. A stealth platform is very different to manufacture when compared to a 4th generation aircraft.
Yeah.
Can we do that right up off the onset? Perhaps we can, perhaps we can't. But as a sensor of sensors and as a platform itself, it's not quite in the league. It is believed as, let's say, the F-35. The F-35, which the Americans may offer to sell us, we cannot buy. Why? Because the Americans won't just give it to us. They'll say you get rid of the S-400. Well, now, after this Op Sindoor, where the S-400 started knocking out near hypersonic speed CM-400 or CM series missiles that the Chinese-built missiles, which Pakistani JF-17s were firing, there is no way that the Indian Air Force is getting rid of Russian-built systems. They are worried that data from the F-35 could be compromised in terms of perhaps its stealth characteristics or certain operational parameters if it is picked up by the radars of the S-400, which is why they will not give us the F-35. Not that the Indian Air Force necessarily wants it either. Not that they want it. So where does that leave the IAF? It is a cause of major concern. China's got the J-20, the JF-35. That's going to go to Pakistan. They might acquire it as well. The J-36 and J-50 are already flying. They see pictures of that all the time. So where does that leave us?
So
in trouble.
Is it not an option not to acquire any of these stealth fighters.
It's not an
and
option.
Not
You
to
have
buy,
to do it.
And
No one is
are
building.
you saying it's not an option at all? How about if we sharpen our air defenses to such an
that's
extent that these stealth fighters with Pakistan and China don't really have the kind of teeth that they would like to think they have? And therefore, it doesn't really matter whether we've got stealth fighters as well. So it's not stealth fighter versus stealth fighter, but stealth fighter versus, don't mess with me air defense.
We already have a don't mess with
Correct.
me air defense.
Correct. They've just
It's
demonstrated
actually
it.
superb. We will need a network of radars, and I'm just wondering if they are L-band radars or what band or what frequency these radars operate on, which are designed to track stealth platforms. We
Yeah.
would need that, and we need that in any case. And they need to be operational.
And we've got good sensors.
We've got great sensors, but we need to outfit our integrated air control system with a series of sensors which are optimized to detecting stealth. It's not easy to do, particularly since a lot of them would be deployed in Himalayan regions as well. There is terrain.
Interesting, yeah.
I did a satellite imagery-based story to show that China's already deployed its J-20 stealth aircraft in Tibet, in frontline airfield. So they're already there. You're going to be fighting your war potentially or anything with them if something like that happens using your Rafale aircraft, which are based in Hashimara. Just 18 of them.
Yeah.
That's in the second sport.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So I want.
But I haven't answered your question, and
Yeah.
very briefly I will.
Please do.
In 20
I was going to
seconds.
double up on that.
In 20 seconds. No, we have an excellent air defense network. We've got endo and exo atmospheric missiles, a missile defense system in the works. We don't know exactly the full state of operation. It's designed to take out ballistic missiles in space and also in the atmosphere, upper reaches. Beneath that is the S-400 system, which engages targets out to a range of 400 kilometers. We've got the Barak 8, which engages missiles to a lower range of, let's say, out to 150 odd kilometers. We've got our own Akash systems, which engage up to, let's say, 40 to 50 kilometers. We've got the Israeli Spider, which engages targets to about 25 odd kilometers. There's also that Akash Prime, which has a somewhat higher
Extended
range,
range,
and it's going to replace most Akash, I think.
Yeah.
And then we've got lower level tech and a host of Russian systems.
Yeah.
To breach this, and they've all been digitalized, is not going to be easy. But the issue is you need to be able to detect stealth aircraft. You need to be able to box them into a kill zone and be able to engage them. Once you track them, you can take them out. The question is tracking them.
Yeah.
Stealth technology is still extremely relevant.
So India's air defense has demonstrated a very, very sharp capability during Operation Sindoor. But the important point is it's
Detecting
been
the
demonstrated
aircraft,
successfully, but this was in a sort of atmosphere without stealth.
Yeah,
aircraft,
non-stealth.
which is a completely different paradigm. So you're saying that is something that needs to be looked at as one. So then I want to ask a similar question, but in another way. And as you can see, Vishnu, I'm really pushing for this let's not import stealth fighters idea, because I think there still is some space for that. And I want to I want to exhaust all options before we're pushed into that.
I don't think we have a good solution in terms of what fifth generation.
So hear me out.
we
Let
can buy.
let me ask it this way. I'm asking, what if we do two things at the same time?
I know where you're getting.
Pour a lot of kerosene into your air defense.
Yeah.
Okay. Pour a lot of kerosene into something that obviously works well, has just acquitted itself excellently in an operational combat scenario, which is your air defense systems. Whether it is more S-400s, whether it is more threat libraries, whether it is the S-500, I don't know. I'm just thinking out of the top of my head, sharpening it, adding the sensors that you spoke about that are optimized for stealth aircraft, the Himalayas, and so on. That's part A. And part B is accelerating the AMCA, optimizing it, aligning it with all of the things we've just spoken about, so it doesn't end up as something that isn't quite modern when it comes online. Trying to compress or reduce that timeline by a few years, 9 years down to, say, 6 or 5 years. Difficult, I'm just saying. And parallelly boosting your air defense in such a way that there's some acceptable meeting point where India basically says, okay, we will do this for 5 years, and if after that we cannot achieve what we've set out to do, then maybe we'll consider a stopgap import of these fighters. Is that a possibility?
I'd look at it somewhat differently. I agree with you that we have to, irrespective of stealth, step up our air defenses, which have done brilliantly well, ensure that the endo and exo-atmospheric interceptor system that's fully deployed. It's an Indian system, absolutely state of the art. It needs to be operationalized in a bigger way. Perhaps acquire even more S-400s, perhaps even go in for the S-500 if it works as it's called the Prometheus. If it works, I love the sound of that. If it works the way it's supposed to. I do believe we need to invest in a future generation technology going above the AMCA itself. I believe the Future Combat Air System, FCAS, which is the Franco-German-Spanish sixth generation fighter platform, or the Tempest, which is a UK, Italy, Japan sixth generation stealth platform, is something which we need to invest in.
They've been trying, though. They've been trying. Both the programs have tried to draw India in.
Incredible amounts of money. It's like, destroying the bank to get this happening. And people would say, if you're already working on AMCA, why are you doing this as well? Because I think AMCA is, gets us to a certain level of technology indigenously. We want to actually exceed the capabilities of the AMCA by the time the AMCA comes online, which is why AMCA Mark II or AMCA Mark III would be of a comparable level. But we need something which takes us into 2070. 2070, Shiv. And for that, we need to be looking at the absolute state of the art right now. The AMCA is already not absolutely state of the art. The Future Combat Air System, FCAS, or the Tempest, the European programs, and the European partners.
It's like the next step of the Typhoon on the Rafale.
Exactly right. And by the way, I believe Saab would also have a sixth generation platform of their own. No, I mean, I asked them actually.
No, but I'm just wondering, a small segue from this, since you mentioned the FCAS and the Tempest, which are both supposed to be next generation fighter aircraft, the FCAS from the Rafale and the Tempest from the Typhoon to replace those aircraft. Aren't these countries making the same mistake that they made with the Typhoon and the Rafale? It was supposed to be one program, and then France went its separate way, Britain went its separate way.
And they both built great planes.
And great planes, but ultimately, splintered each other's markets.
No, you're probably right, but I don't know enough about the marketing of both of these platforms and the mess that Eurofighter and Rafale made. I will say that the Rafale has won that battle.
Won that battle. Okay,
belatedly, but they have.
So is it look, operational sovereignty when it comes to something as advanced as a stealth fighter is something that the Indian government has emphasized. And I think the signal that they sent out on the AMCA when they announced its execution model so soon after Operation Sindoor appeared to suggest, Vishnu, that they have chosen to bet on the AMCA.
They have no choice.
Okay, they've got no choice on that.
I'm just looking beyond that.
Yeah, okay. And we've talked about what the options are, but do you think that, practically speaking, making this a completely Indian aircraft is not going to happen without some sacrifices? And there is a possibility that India can or should be open to a tie-up with another country, but then that would erode the very basis of this whole operational sovereignty.
I think it's too late.
You can't do it?
The basic design work, I believe, is complete or near completion. If you've locked in a design, you don't necessarily want others to work on it because you think that it's going to work. You've not run into problems, at least none that we are aware of. You've not built it, so we don't really know. The engines, if the entire General Electric thing works out, and we certainly hope it does, would mean that those engines are built in India. It's not an Indian engine, but progressively the technology you pick up sets up that ecosystem, and then perhaps for the future we'd have engines. Look, AMCA 100%, not a choice. We should have had it out sooner. If we have it out now, that's great, but we cannot stop investing in technology and looking well beyond. We are now, Shiv, you and me, because we are enthusiasts and we love our armed forces and we love our indigenous platforms, really looking forward to the Tejas Mark II. And we both know it is dated before it enters service. That's a fact. Similarly, we don't want to be in a situation where the AMCA is dated and completely, is dated by the time it enters service, which is why you need to be looking at the next generation while the AMCA is always there. You'll have different aircraft of different grades operating. It's not just going to be your A-line fighters. There'll be fighters of a different capability, which would also occupy a certain space in the air warfare sort of sector, as it were.
Last question then, Vishnu. Private sector or the existing setup?
Both.
Together?
Absolutely. I believe the manufacturing of platforms by the private sector in India has really picked up. You've got a lot of excellent, enthusiastic companies. Carbon composite technology is something that has really picked up in India. If private companies are incentivized and are given strict contracts, they want the defense sector to work, they will deliver. HAL would be the lead. HAL and the extended DRDO setup would be the primary designers of the aircraft.
Right.
That's their skill set. And they might even be the final integrators of the platform. But you need more places from where components are coming in, so that private-public partnership both, 100%.
So we did an episode earlier about the Tata Rafale deal, where they're going to be building those fuselages. So the Tatas are also plunging into fighter manufacture. So the system is kind of priming itself for all of this, and it is definitely ready. And if it isn't ready, it's definitely getting ready for this big project. So we're going to end this episode here. Vishnu, like you said, and I agree, it feels like we haven't spoken enough about
Stealth
the
platforms.
AMCA and stealth fighters in general.
We haven't.
So this means we can promise you that this episode is going to be the first of many on this particular topic. And before ending, just wanted to say that this episode is powered by IFCO Tokyo, and we will continue to bring you the very latest analysis on Control Alt Defense. Vishnu and I signing out. Thanks so much for watching.
Goodbye.